I recently picked up this little laptop. It is a 386SX that has some issues. As I've been doing my 386SX and DX work, I thought it would be interesting to see some other just reference designs. You know, what would a laptop look like back from the day where this laptop was new and came out. So I grabbed this, and the lister had listed this on eBay and said it had been dropped, and obviously wasn't working at this point. But I grabbed it and I tore it apart, and I just thought I'd show you maybe what this board looks like in comparison to some of the stuff I've been working on. Definitely there's some neat things on this board that I'd love to be able to integrate into my design at some point, but maybe I'm not there today. So here on the board, you can see the top view in the upper left and the bottom view in the lower right. And I just kind of went through this to just see if I could identify what are all the major parts of this. And so on the top, it looks like here we've got a BIOS chip in the lower left of it. Right beside that, we've got a math coprocessor. The chip to the right of that, I could not find any references to online, but based on its connectivity, just looking at the traces going up to the RAM, I'm going to assume that that is some sort of a DRAM, dynamic RAM controller. Off to that right of that, there's a keyboard controller IC. There's some line drivers up towards the top of the board, and that'd be for the serial ports. There's a little chip there that I believe is a frequency generator. And then there's RAM, and there's two 2 megabyte sticks of RAM. And these aren't standard SIM type of slots, I guess. They're a weird connector. I don't know what the connector is, but basically they're a bunch of pins, dual row pins that stick into a female socket on the board. On the bottom of the card, there is, it looks like a Super I/O chip. There's an actual LCD VGA controller along with video RAM to go with that. Not a lot of video RAM, like maybe half a meg is what I'm guessing that we're looking at there. Then there's the actual processor, and it is a 386SXLV. And so if you've been following my series on my 386, or actually my 286 series, I recently upgraded it, but as part of that, I had ordered up an SXL. That's kind of this version that allows you to lower power by stopping the clock and or running a slow clock on it. But interesting, it's got, and maybe to be expected on a laptop, it's got the SXLV version. And then over to the right, there's just some RAM, and that would be onboard 2 meg. So the system has a total of 6 meg of RAM. In the configuration with these extra 2 RAM slots populated. And then there's an IDE controller off to the right that goes to a hard drive. There's a connector here that goes to a floppy drive. And on the back of the PC there is a VGA output, a couple of serials, a parallel, and it looks like a floppy drive. It looks like a parallel connector, a DB25, but it's got an icon of a floppy on it, so it must be an external disk drive. Now, to get this repaired, I did a few things. First of all, I had to grab a replacement external 20-volt power supply. The one that came with it, I could not get any voltage out of it. It appeared to have issues, and I wasn't going to mess with. I typically don't mess with AC power coming in. I try to just stay away from that. So I grabbed a different power supply. I had an old laptop one that was a 19 volt. I figured close enough, and so I just simply cut the proprietary connector off the old 20 volt, put it onto the 19 volt, and used that for my external power coming into the laptop. But in the laptop itself, I also had to recap or replace all the capacitors on this little power board that's sitting here. And that's providing power to the LCD, so I suppose the backlight or whatever it's using for power there. Those 2 connectors here are actually AC power coming out of this, so it's going from a DC to an AC. And then also supplying power to the rest of the board. So it connects through a little header here onto the board and supplies throughout the board the different voltages that are needed along with the LCD power. I did also have to fix the chassis. You know, as you saw in the earlier picture, that chassis was pretty broken up on a hinge, and it just fell apart when I did take it apart. So I did a little creative metal and plastic and adhesive work there, and actually got that solidified quite well. So it's a workable hinge again at this point. And then the hard drive was not working, and I actually ended up having to open up the hard drive and internally free up the actuator arm, and then I found that it was sticking, and this must have been a known thing with this drive or drives like this back in the day, but I actually had to get some, I put some Teflon tape in a certain location on the internal where the actuator arm basically connects or touches part of the chassis of the drive, and that kept it from sticking. So put that back together, and now I have all of those things done, put back together, and turn on the system, and it is working. And interestingly, the system, you can see it booting here, but basically shows that I've got an 8386. This again is that SXLV version. I've got a floppy drive that's detected. I haven't tested the floppy drive yet, but I can hear it doing its normal checks on post, so it sounds like it's trying to work. Base memory 640K, and then the rest to get me up to that 6 meg for the extended memory. The hard drive is only 64 megabytes, so quite small. But it gets through that, and my video capture on the output of it isn't quite syncing the start of the horizontal drawing, so it's missing some pixels to the left, but basically goes through, does the high memory test, gets me to a command prompt, and I found that it actually has Windows installed on this. So the drive came with DOS 622 on it, and it has Windows for Workgroups 3.11, which I have not seen in a long time. And so got that opened up, and I noticed it even has a PCB drawing program installed on it. So PC Board's Circuit Board Editor is what I'm launching here. And don't know anything about it, but did open it up and said, okay, let's add a component. And I went and found a PLCC 68, or actually a PGA 68, and grabbed that and drew it out on my board. So very exciting PCB board editor. But I thought that was interesting just to get this old laptop, try to get it up and running, and really just identify, you know, what does the design look like? What does it include on this old system? And if anybody recognizes this laptop, let me know. It seems like it's a pretty obscure laptop. I've only found a couple of posts out there even about this laptop, so there's not much that I could find. But I thought the design's pretty interesting and has a lot of things that little by little I'm working on. But that's about it. So thought I'd share. Thought it was interesting. Thought maybe some of you might like to see inside the internals of an old laptop, an old 386SX.